In this lesson, we'll learn how we can start to selectively add and clear nodes from the node editor. Okay, so before we jump ahead of ourselves and start to get too deep into the process of making and breaking connections inside the node editor, what I really want to do is take a few minutes to get you familiarized with the process of adding and clearing nodes from the node editor. That'll make things a lot easier from this point on. Okay, so to make things a little bit easier for you to see, what I'm going to do is jump to a slightly different layout. So it's just maybe go to this perspective / graph view, and I will just take this graph, go to panels, down to panel, and switch this to the node editor. There we go. That'll make this a little bit easier for you to see and follow along with. That way we don't have a bunch of different windows floating around in here. So the process of adding nodes into your node editor is pretty straightforward. All we have to do is just select an object if we don't currently have it listed here in the node editor. With that object selected, we can come in here and graph that in. So you can use the input and output, or just the output. These should be really familiar if you're a fan of working with the hypershade in Maya. So with this object selected, let's start with the input and output connections, this middle button right here. Now, if I click on that, that's going to show all of the different inputs, which you have, in my case, things like the projection, the extrude, things like that. You can see all of those nodes have been listed in here. And it also shows the output connections. So in this case, this cube and its output among those is this Lambert material that I'm using. Okay, so when it comes to working with some of these different nodes, the process of clearing these out is sometimes a little bit tricky. Now you want to avoid just simply selecting a node and pressing the delete key on your keyboard, because you can see as soon as I select a node here in the node editor, it also selects it up here in the viewport. So if I select a node here and press delete, it's not clearing it out of the node editor, it's actually deleting it entirely from my scene. So let me just undo that real quick. Now let's say that I want to maybe just have one of these nodes in here. Let's say maybe just two of these different extrusions, and I want to clear out everything else. So what I'll do is, with these nodes selected, we can use a function called pinning. Now a pin can be applied either to the corner of each one of these nodes one by one. You can see that little green pin becomes active. Or if I have several nodes selected, I can also apply a pin from this little menu bar up here. You can see when I click on this, it now applies the pin to both of these nodes. Now, if a node has been pinned down, what this will do is prevent it from being cleared out. If we were to come in here and, let's say, clear the graph, you can see it will go ahead and clear the graph. It doesn't delete any of these nodes. They're still in the scene. They're just not currently visible in this graph. But because these two nodes were pinned down, they are left behind. And now I'm free to start working with these two nodes without any interference from anything else or any other visual clutter. Okay, now if I don't have anything pinned, so let's say I come in here and grab these two nodes once again, and let's say I unpin those. You can see now the pin's grayed out. So if none of these nodes are pinned down, if we were to come in here and clear the graph, it completely removes everything from the graph. Again, still exists in my scene, it just clears it from the graph. Now, let's take a look at something a little bit different. I'll come back in here and grab this once again, regraph that connection. Now, if I want to maybe just remove one particular node and leave all of the others behind, what I could do is, let's say I want to remove this Lambert node in here. Everything else is just fine. I just want to remove that one. So what I could do is just select just this node, and with that one selected, we could choose this option to remove the selected nodes. It's going to be this little blue sphere with this trash can next to it. With that selected, or with that pressed, you can see now it's removed just that node. Again, it hasn't deleted it from my scene, it's just removed it from this particular graph. Now, let's talk about how we can start to add nodes from other objects into this node editor here. So let's say, for example, I come in and create let's say maybe just a polygon cylinder. Okay, now you'll notice that any new objects that I create automatically get added here into the node editor. Okay, so that's nice. Now what if I need to access a different node that's maybe a part of this cube here? So let's say maybe the Lambert node that I had just deleted. Now if I select this cube shape here, and if I regraph the input and output connections, you can see that it has brought this node back, but the cylinder that I had previously is no longer listed in this graph. Now the same goes if I select this cylinder again, and let's say I want to graph that. Now here's the cylinder, but my other object is gone. So sometimes getting exactly what you want into this node editor can be a little bit of a tricky process. So what I want to show you is a really useful feature that if you right click, you can find this. It's called an additive graphing mode. Okay, now this option is going to be found if you just right click out in any of these open areas. So I'm just going to right click, go to additive graphing, and what this will do is now if I select a new object and let's say I graph it in here, it will graph that new object in but still keep anything that I previously had listed in here as well. Now anytime I do this, what you'll find is a lot of times these two different graphs come in really far apart. So what you'll probably need to do is anytime you start to use this additive graphing mode and start to add things into your graph, what you'll probably need to do is use this option here to just rearrange your graph and clean that up. So now if I click on that, it'll take all the different nodes in my graph and lay those out. Okay, so now I have my cylinder as well as my cube. And this process can just continue to unfold. So let's say with this cube, now I have the Lambert here. Let's say I want to access that checker texture that's part of this Lambert. Again, with this additive mode enabled, I can just select this Lambert node, and with that I'll graph its input and output connections. Again, you can see my graph goes completely wild, but I can just come in, click on this to relay that out. And now here's all of my different nodes. None of them have been removed, but now it takes this Lambert, expands that. Again, I can continue to expose the inputs for that, and I can just keep following this graph until I get to where I want. And I don't have to worry about accidentally losing anything that I may have previously had. So you can see I can start to expand these and start to find some of the additional nodes inside. Really nice feature. Okay, now the last thing I want to show you before we wrap up this lesson is a really quick and easy way of accessing maybe just the materials or just the shading network of any object that you want. So if I select this cube, what I could do is just right click inside this node editor, and let's go to this graph materials on viewport selection. With that, I can come in here and now just limit my node editor to the material and any textures and other supplemental nodes that make up the shading network for that object. Again, if I right click on this, right click, graph viewport selection, now we have just the material node for that object. So this becomes a really quick and easy way of limiting your node connections, your node graph, to just a material and its corresponding textures. Okay, so now that we've had a chance to see some different methods of bringing your different nodes in, graphing them, laying them out, and controlling exactly which nodes are displayed here in the node editor, what we'll start to do at our next lesson is start to explore the process of making and breaking connections between these different nodes.